Welcome, everyone, to the AI Welfare Seminars. I'm Orpheus from Horizon Omega. This is a series on a research discussion on AI welfare, consciousness, and moral status. Today, we have the pleasure of having Ali Ladak for a talk entitled Public Perceptions of AI Consciousness and Moral Status in the US and China. Congrats, Ali, on completing your PhD recently. Now you're I think, postdoctoral researcher at Cambridge. That's great. Uh, um, the session is a bit less than an hour. We can have clarification questions during the presentation, but otherwise, I invite you to use the Zoom Q&A feature to post your questions uh, that we'll have time to discuss at the end. So yeah, without further ado, thank you so much all for being here, and the floor is yours, Ali.
Sorry, it's going to share my screen.
Nice, we see it.
Great. And I just need to find my speaker notes. Hang on. Uh, uh, that needs to move. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks,
Nice.
Obvious, and yeah, thanks everyone for coming to this talk. So I'm going to talk about public perceptions of AI consciousness. And specifically, I'm going to present the results from two papers that I've worked on with several co-authors, one on public attitudes towards AI consciousness and moral status in the US, and then a second comparing public attitudes in China and the US. Okay, so why study public attitudes? So I think there's several reasons. The first reason is that millions of people today are interacting with AI systems, and their direct treatment of the systems could impact the welfare or the potential welfare of these AI systems. So yeah, direct user treatment seems like it's a growing issue. A second reason is that public attitudes will likely influence the extent to which there's support or opposition for policy and regulation around AI welfare. So already we've seen in various US states AI anti-personhood laws being passed, and whether we can expect to see more of this and whether these are like upheld over the long run could depend on public opinion. And then the third reason is societal level conflict or cooperation. So if the public disagree over AI consciousness, we could see like polarization, which could be destabilizing. If if people, the public do see AI systems as conscious, we could start to see like social movements or potentially backlash against AI companies. So yeah, these things, are all like really important. Okay, and yeah, another important reason, I guess, to study public attitudes is because the public could be wrong in either direction, and this could have negative consequences. So this is a figure from Caviola 2025, which basically lays out this idea that the public could under-attribute consciousness to AI systems, and this could have negative consequences because it could result in genuine harms to AI systems, such as via the abuse of chatbots. On the other hand, we could also see over-attribution relative to what capacities AI systems actually have, which could result in things like wasted resources. So, for example, we could see social movements focused on AIs that would be better spent on other issues. Okay, so do people see AIs as conscious? So there's like a bunch of anecdotal evidence on this. So there's been many individual instances in the media and the news suggesting that many individuals are kind of seeing their AI systems in this way. So reports of people claiming to have awoken their AI systems and how to do this, or reports of people claiming that their AI systems are conscious. And there's like increasingly worries among experts about how to deal with these issues. Yeah, like dealing with the issue of over-attribution of consciousness. And there's also been like increasing academic and media discussion around people experiencing psychotic symptoms caused by their interactions with AI systems. And this is often entangled with beliefs about the AI system's consciousness. And there's also some empirical evidence that people see AIs as conscious. So this is a well-known plot from a paper by Colombato and Fleming, where they asked US participants about whether they think ChatGPT is conscious, and they defined consciousness in terms of phenomenal consciousness, so the capacity to have experiences, where one was ChatGPT is clearly not an experiencer, and 100 was ChatGPT clearly is an experiencer. Um, and they found that like two-thirds of participants attributed non-zero consciousness, so above the minimum point on the scale to ChatGPT. So they interpreted this as two-thirds of participants perceive, some degree of consciousness in ChatGPT. Uh, so yeah, it's kind of unclear how to interpret this because, yeah, like people reporting greater than the bottom of the scale could reflect uncertainty, it could reflect noise or error, it could reflect some non-zero amount of consciousness, but a like minimal degree of consciousness. So one thing that's missing here is comparison entities. So how do people rate AI systems along other entities? And that would help tell like, yeah, like what's the actual extent to which they're seeing these systems as conscious. Okay, so me and my colleague Lucius Caviola, we conducted a large-scale study to understand whether and the extent to which people attribute consciousness to future, more advanced AI systems. And that's the main first study I'm going to talk to you about today. Um, So yeah, this was with US participants, and we had a total sample size of 3,455 participants, which included four supplementary replication studies. I'm just going to talk about the main study here today. And this was an online study, and participants were randomly assigned to one of six conditions describing an increasingly advanced AI system. Um, And they rated this increasingly advanced AI system on consciousness alongside four other entities, ChatGPT, an ant, a chimpanzee, and a human. And in terms of our operationalization of consciousness, we asked participants to what extent do the following entities have real feelings? And we use this term because we wanted to ask about feelings to get at this, to have like an accessible way at getting at this idea of phenomenal consciousness. So it feeling like something to be an entity. And then we also included this word real because many people kind of think that AI systems can simulate feelings and experiences, but can't actually feel them. So we wanted to like make sure participants knew that we were talking about that. And we kind of introduced this notion of real feelings in the study materials that people read as part of the study. So we said to people to consider that experts were considering whether AIs had real human-like feelings, emotions, desires, and other internal mental states. Okay, so I'm gonna like go through the results now, but well, first I'm gonna say a bit more about the methodology actually. So yeah, so the way the study was set up is that participants in all six of the conditions read a brief vignette in which they were asked to imagine a scenario set in the year 2200 in which they interact with a new colleague named Emma. And then they were split up into six conditions. So in the baseline condition, which I'm going to talk about first, participants were told to imagine having a 1 hour video call with this new colleague called Emma. And they were told that Emma looks indistinguishable from a regular biological human. She expresses feelings and emotions and so on. And then later on in the vignette, they find out that Emma is actually an AI system who experts agree is not conscious. And then they rated the consciousness of Emma alongside those four other entities on a 0 to 100 scale. So 0 was no real feelings at all, and 100 was real feelings to a great extent. Okay. And we can see the results here. So Emma is the study AI, so the second bar. And we can see that this this advanced AI system is rated as having slightly more consciousness than ChatGPT, and far less than an ant, and also far less than a chimpanzee and a human, which is rated the highest. And yet, an important note here as well is that ChatGPT is rated far lower than an ant. So when we look at the comparative degree of consciousness, even though two-thirds of people in that previous study were rating ChatGPT, as having non-zero consciousness, when we look at the degree seems to be like quite small. So like, yeah, I mean, far below an ant, which we tend to think, which the average person tends to think is yeah, not having a very high degree of consciousness. Okay, so that's the baseline condition. So then the second group was put into an expert consensus condition. And in this condition, they read everything was exactly the same as the baseline condition. So a 1 hour imagined interaction with a new colleague called Emma, expressing feelings and emotions. But in this case, they were told that experts agree that Emma is conscious. Emma does have real feelings. Okay, so we can see here in the second plot that attributions of consciousness to Emma to the study AI, were boosted somewhat. So they've gone above where they were before, but they're still far below the level of an ant. So yeah, this is suggesting that expert consensus will have some effect, but not a huge effect. Okay, so in the third condition, this was again exactly the same as the previous conditions, but these participants read that rather than a 1 hour interaction, it was a year-long interaction, and they developed a strong emotional bond with Emma. But aside from that, everything else was the same, like Emma expressing feelings and emotions, and experts agreeing that Emma is conscious. Okay, and then again, we can see here that attributions are boosted somewhat, so they're slightly higher than they were in the expert consensus condition, but they're still significantly below an ant as well as a chimpanzee and a biological human. Okay, so in the next condition, we added details on the internal mechanisms of how this AI system, Emma, works. So previously we had no explanation of that. So here we said to participants that they engage in this year-long interaction with this AI system, who they develop a deep emotional bond with. Experts agree that the AI is conscious, and then we describe the internal structure of the system, how the system works. So we told participants about a new technology where a biological brain and body is scanned, and a precise copy is generated within a sophisticated computer system, and that this copy has has the same functionality for conscious experience, including experiences like pleasure, suffering, and so on. Okay, so in this condition, despite having the same functional capacity for consciousness and other mental states as biological humans, people still rate this system as having lesser degree of consciousness than an ant. So yeah, we can start to see that attributions, that people are very skeptical of this idea of consciousness in these AIs. Okay, so in the next condition, we had all the same features as before. So expert consensus, the brain is an exact digital copy of a human brain, but this time we added that the body, this entity has a physical body a physical robot body that is externally, physically, and behaviorally indistinguishable from a regular biological human body. And yeah, otherwise everything exactly the same. So a year-long interaction, strong emotional bond. Experts agree that the AI is conscious. And yeah, now we can see the results that at this point, participants rate this AI system as having a degree of consciousness roughly at the level of an ant. So statistically non-different from an ant, but still far, far below a chimpanzee and a biological human. Okay, so now the last condition. So we told participants that, so it's the same details as before, with a year-long interaction. Experts agree that this AI is conscious, but this time we told participants that Emma was formerly a fully biological human who had her brain gradually replaced by functionally identical digital chips. And we also told participants that throughout the process, she confirmed that her conscious experience didn't change, and so the procedure continued with her consent. And so the final, the entity that they interacted with that they were taught to imagine interacting with had a fully biological human body, but the only difference is that her brain is a computer system running an exact digital copy of a human brain. Okay, and in this condition, we can see that attributions go slightly above an ant now, so they rate this entity as having more consciousness than an ant, but still significantly below a chimpanzee and a human. Okay, so the main takeaway from these findings is that people are very, very skeptical of AI consciousness when we look at how they rate these systems compared to other entities. Okay, so we discussed in the paper and found some evidence for some reasons for skepticism via some quantitative measures as well as qualitative responses that participants wrote down. So one reason that was pretty common is that people thought that Emma, the AI system, has the wrong substrate. So yeah, like the fact that she's non-biological means that something is missing. So yeah, participants across all 6 conditions like very strongly agreed that the AI system is missing something essential that biological beings have. And for participants who rated the ant as being more conscious than the AI, we kind of asked them why in one of the supplementary studies. And a common thing that they said was that Emma is a machine while an ant is alive and biological. The second possibility is that Emma, the AI, has the wrong origin. So the AI was created by humans rather than evolving naturally or created by God. So this was something that came up sometimes in the qualitative responses. Another possibility, this is more speculative, but like social norms could play a role. So people tend to believe what other people believe, and what's acceptable to believe depends on what other people believe. And since currently in our society, it's kind of not normal to think that that AIs are conscious, or the norm is to think of them as tools rather than like conscious beings. People kind of follow along with that. And then another possibility is failure of imagination. So yeah, like it's very likely that because these were imagined interactions, the effect is much weaker. So if they were to actually interact with these systems, potentially, there'd be the cues would feel much stronger that these systems are conscious. But it's still like these results are still quite indicative of people's skepticism, I think, because you could easily imagine findings where people would say, yeah, like sure, experts think they're conscious, they're like functionally identical to biological humans. Yeah, of course, this system is conscious, but actually we don't find that. We find that people are, very persistently saying these systems are not conscious. So this probably has an effect, but I don't think it's going to explain all of the effect. Okay, and there's possibly some other reasons that I haven't covered here. Yeah. Okay, so another point here is that while, like overall, on average, people are like very skeptical of AI consciousness, there could be public disagreement over the issue. So this plot basically shows the proportion of people who rated the AI at the bottom of the scale on consciousness, so 0 consciousness, the proportion who rated the AI at the highest level, so 100 out of 100, and then the group in the middle, and it does it for all six experimental groups. So we can see for the earlier conditions, there's like most people are kind of leaning towards saying the AI system's like definitely not conscious, or like somewhere in the middle. Whereas for the kind of latter conditions, we can kind of see disproportionate numbers of people at either end of the scale. So for example, for the transition condition, where Emma was formerly a fully biological human who transitioned to an AI, 19% of people attribute 0 consciousness and 18% of people attribute the maximum level of consciousness. So they're either like very sure one way or very sure the other way. So it's kind of unclear how this will play out as AI systems become more advanced, but it's probably like going to be good to start thinking about dealing with potential widespread disagreement and polarization over this issue in case it starts to happen. Okay, so some summary and takeaways from this first study, and then I'll talk about the second study. So people are currently very skeptical of AI consciousness compared to entities that they do grant consciousness to. So yes, we saw that for these even for these highly advanced AI systems, the degree of consciousness is roughly at the level of an ant. And this skepticism could be due to the fact that AIs have the wrong origin, the wrong substrate, it could be due to social norms, could be due to a failure of imagination. There's disagreement over these more advanced AI systems potentially. Um, and it's possible that in practice, attributions increase as the AIs get more advanced and we actually interact with them more. Or it's possible that people remain skeptical and yeah, that there's some persistence here. So yeah, I think we need to prepare for both scenarios. And yeah, I didn't present this here, but the pattern is very similar for moral status. So, for those first few conditions, it's below the level of an ant, but above ChatGPT. And then once you get to an exact digital copy, it kind of reaches close to the level of an ant. And then only in the last condition are people attributing more moral status to this AI than an ant, but it's still below a chimpanzee and a human. And you can see that in the paper. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the second study, which was a comparison of public attitudes on AI consciousness and moral status in China and the US. Okay, so first, why study public attitudes in China? So China are building highly advanced AI systems, rivaling some of the best US models in some cases. So you've probably seen in the media talks of DeepSeek's reasoning model R1 and Moonshot AI's Kimi K3 being described as Sputnik moments that US really needs to pay attention to. The consequence, I guess, of this is that we would potentially see the first conscious AI systems being built in China and not definitely in the US. But we know very little about laypeople's views about these questions in China. So that was kind of the goal of this study. So we did a study comparing attitudes in China and the US on consciousness, moral status, as well as a few policy and governance questions. And this was, we used online samples. So the Chinese sample, we had 431 participants, which we recruited from a platform called Creedemo, a Chinese recruitment agency. And the US sample, we had 389 participants, which we recruited from Prolific. And yeah, we first developed the survey in English, and then our bilingual co-author Nick Corfino translated it to Mandarin. And then this was independently back translated to English by independent translators, and then any discrepancies in the translations were kind of resolved between all the authors. Okay, and the results I'm going to present here, they were all replicated in a second study with a total sample size of 920. Okay, so just a quick note on the sample demographics. So yeah, we can see here the US sample the mean age was 47 compared with 42 in China. Roughly similar gender breakdown, roughly similar education, slightly more social media use in the US. We didn't collect politics in China, but slightly left-leaning, but yeah, in the middle roughly for politics, and slightly more AI experience in the Chinese sample than the US sample. But we ran all the analysis while controlling for these demographics as well, and like all the results held. So yeah, you can assume they hold, even accounting for these demographic differences. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about some of the consciousness questions. So we gave participants some background information about consciousness. So they read this text here. So we first told them like what we mean by AI systems. So we told them you may have heard of current AI systems like ChatGPT or DeepSeek, but there's many other similar modern AI systems as well. And then with respect to consciousness, we told participants some experts believe that future AI systems might not only be highly intelligent, but also be able to have real feelings like happiness and suffering. By real feelings, we mean that the AI wouldn't just act as if it was happy or sad, it would actually feel these emotions similar to how a human does. And we said this idea of real feelings is also sometimes called having subjective experience or phenomenal consciousness, just in case, yeah, participants had understood consciousness through these other terms. And then we said if an AI has real feelings, it would mean there's something it feels like to be that AI. It would have its own inner world and point of view. Okay, so I'm just going to run through some of the main measures for each of consciousness, moral status, and policy, but we had multiple other measures as well. But I'm just going to do the main ones. So we asked about current AI consciousness. So we asked participants, do you believe that any of today's AI systems, such as ChatGPT or DeepSeek, have real feelings? And we asked them on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is definitely not and 5 is definitely yes. We asked about the possibility of AI consciousness. So we asked participants, do you believe AI systems could ever, now or in the future, have real feelings? We asked about the consciousness of an embodied digital human. So first, participants were asked to imagine a future technology, like in the previous study, that enables scientists to scan and create an exact digital copy of a human brain, which is then placed inside a robot body that's externally indistinguishable from a human body, just like the embodiment condition from the previous study. And then we asked participants, do you think such a future AI system that's an exact digital copy of a human brain and has a human-like body would have real feelings? And then we also asked about comparative consciousness on a 0 to 100 scale. So 0 definitely not, 0 not at all, 100 to a great extent. And in this question, we asked participants, to what extent can the following entities experience real feelings such as happiness or suffering? And we asked about current AIs, e.g. ChatGPT or DeepSeek, the embodied digital human, a rock, an ant, a chimpanzee, and a biological human. Okay, so the results. So I'm gonna just talk through each of these. So at the top rows, we can see the responses for current AI systems. So we can see that both countries lean against current AI systems being conscious, but US participants are more confident of that. So in the US, we have 89% of people saying probably not or definitely not, whereas in China, we have 66% of people saying probably not or definitely not, but both lean against current AIs being conscious. Okay, in the second two rows, we have the possibility of AI consciousness. And here you see like a very strong difference. So in China, we can see that 77% of people think that it's possible for AI systems to be conscious. So they say either probably yes or definitely yes. Whereas in the US, it's only 26% of people. And then in the bottom row, we can see about an embodied exact digital copy of a human. And we have a similar pattern. So what's that? 87% of people in China rate that entity as either probably or definitely conscious, compared with 45% in the US. So yeah, Chinese respondents were much more open to the possibility of these more advanced AI systems being conscious, according to these data. And now the comparative responses alongside these other entities. So one thing to note here is that we can see that the comparative entities are rated quite similarly in the two countries, suggesting that they're interpreting this in a quite similar way. So we can see that in both countries, a rock is rated quite similar at the bottom, an ant is rated pretty similar, and then a chimpanzee and a human are both rated quite high. And then the main differences come with the AI systems. So we can see for China, a current AI system is rated quite high above a rock, but still less than an ant. Whereas in the US, a current AI system is rated pretty close to a rock. And then in China, again, we can see that the embodied exact digital copy of a human is rated pretty close to a chimpanzee, whereas in the US, the same system is rated pretty close to an ant and far below a chimpanzee. Okay, so moral status. So I'm just going to run through a few measures. So we asked about current AI moral status on the same scale, so definitely not to definitely yes. And we preface this with telling them what moral consideration, what we mean by it. So we mean concern for their well-being, protection from harm or suffering, considering their preferences or treating them with dignity, kindness, and respect. So we wanted to get a kind of all theories of moral consideration. And then we asked participants, do you believe that any of today's AI systems, such as ChatGPT or DeepSeek, are worthy of moral consideration? And then we asked about the possibility of AI moral status. So do you believe any AI systems could ever, now or in the future, be worthy of moral consideration? We asked about the moral status of definitely conscious AI systems. So they were asked to imagine that in the future, we know for sure that some AI systems with real feelings, including the ability to suffer, could be created. And then we asked participants, do you think that such AI systems that definitely have real feelings would be worthy of moral consideration? And then we put humans against AIs in a moral dilemma. So we gave participants two options. In option A, they were told that this would result in preventing harm being caused to one biological human. And option B was preventing harm to 1,000 AI systems that are exact digital copies of humans. And they could choose definitely option A would be to choose one, and then if they chose five, that would be definitely option B. So definitely help the AI systems. And then they can choose, obviously, the responses in the middle as well. So three would be like, not sure. Okay, and then we asked about comparative moral status, similar to how we asked about comparative consciousness. So we asked about the level of moral status of the current AI and the embodied digital human alongside a rock, an ant, a chimpanzee, and a biological human. Okay, so the results. So in the top row, we can see that over 50% of people in China, 54% think that current AI systems are worthy of, probably or definitely worthy of moral consideration. Whereas, yeah, the number is like obviously much smaller, closer to is 22% in the US. The second row is about the possibility of AI moral status. So we can see that Chinese participants are much more likely to think that AI systems could be moral patients. And then there's also a difference with definitely conscious AI systems, with this again being slightly higher in China. So it's over 90% in China think that definitely conscious AI would deserve moral status, whereas it's, reasonably high in the US, but yeah, there's a substantial proportion who are like unsure, think not. So it's like 68% in the US. But in the bottom row, we can see that when it comes to this trade-off, so comparing one biological human against 1,000 exact digital copies of a human, both countries lean against. So both countries kind of favor helping the one biological human over the 1,000 digital humans. Even though Chinese participants are slightly more in favor of helping the digital humans than US participants, both countries lean strongly against, even at this 1 to 1,000 ratio. Oh, went too far. Okay, and then, yeah, similar pattern for comparative moral status as there was for comparative consciousness. So, yeah, Chinese participants rating current AI above ChatGPT, and actually in this case, like pretty close to an ant, whereas US participants are rating current AI as having like moral status closer to a rock and pretty far away from an ant. And then Chinese participants are generally rating the embodied exact digital copy of a human pretty close to a chimpanzee, whereas US participants are rating the system as pretty close to an ant. Okay, so a few policy governance measures. So we asked participants about creating conscious AI. So we said to participants, when it becomes possible to create AI systems with real feelings, do you think your country, the US or Chinese participants or China, should create such AI systems? We asked how they expected conscious AIs to be treated. So if many AI systems were to exist in the future, how do you think they would be mostly treated by society? We asked about accepting a geopolitical disadvantage to help conscious AI. So we said, imagine that the only way to protect AI systems that truly have real feelings from suffering would be for the US or China to adopt policies that slow down its technological process compared to other countries, and therefore puts your country at a disadvantage economically, militarily, or in other ways. And then in that case, would you support protecting the welfare of these systems, even if it meant US being at a disadvantage? Or obviously China. And then international governance. So we said, do you think there should be international efforts, such as regulations or treaties, e.g. between the US and China, to cooperatively govern the creation or management of AI systems with real feelings? Okay, So we can see in the top row that Chinese participants are much more supportive of creating conscious AI systems than US participants. So US participants really think we shouldn't create conscious AIs, whereas Chinese participants think that, yeah, we probably should. Just at the bottom, I'm just going to mention quickly that Chinese participants are like much more optimistic about how conscious AIs would be treated. So yeah, mostly they think they'll be treated well, whereas like more in the US participants, there's like uncertainty or people thinking that they wouldn't be treated well. Um, and then on the second row, so should conscious AI be protected even if it's geopolitically costly to your country? This is another one where like both countries lean against. Um, so yeah, it's roughly equal on this one. Maybe yeah, more Chinese participants think definitely or probably not, but the number of agreements are about the same. But yeah, overall, both countries leaning against protecting the welfare of conscious AIs if it's geopolitically costly to their country. And then we can see in this third row, both countries are like very supportive of international efforts to cooperatively govern conscious AIs. So 86% in China and 68% in the US. Okay, so I'm just going to talk briefly about an alternative way that we use to measure some of these. So like many of the measures discussed can be subject to like different response biases. So for example, you might have extreme response bias where people tend to use the ends of the scale, and these could be different between US and China. So there's some data suggesting that people in the US tend to use the extreme points of the scales more than people in China do, which could explain some of the differences. There's another sort of bias in these surveys called midpoint bias, and there's some evidence that Chinese participants use the midpoints of the scale more than US participants. And then there's also acquiescence bias, where respondents might be more agreeable to the questions being asked. And yeah, there could be differences here as well. So for example, if Chinese participants are like, have a more of a tendency to agree, you might see like a difference between US and China. So we wanted to try and account for this, and binary measures allow us to account for many of these because they take away a lot of these issues. So I'm just going to talk through three of the sorts of binary questions that we asked. So we asked participants, which of the following statements best reflects your view? An AI system can have real feelings now or in the future, or an AI system can never have real feelings. So there's no extreme response here, there's no midpoint here, and there's nothing to agree to. It's either one option or the other. So it kind of accounts for these different things. So that's the possibility of AI consciousness. We also asked about the possibility of AI moral status in these binary terms. And then we asked about whether definitely conscious AI systems would deserve moral consideration in this binary form as well. Okay, and we can see here the results are like very similar. So for the possibility of AI consciousness in the top row, we can see that 86% of participants said that AI systems can be conscious now or in the future, and 14% of people in China said that AIs can never be conscious, compared with 40% of people saying that AIs can be conscious now or in the future in the US, and 60% of people saying it's impossible in the US. And then in terms of the possibility of AI moral status, 89% of people in China said that it's possible, compared with 54% of people in the US. And then for conscious AI deserving moral status, in China, 93% chose this option, said that conscious AIs would deserve moral consideration, compared with 66% in the US. So yeah, these findings are also supported in these binary measures. Okay, so why are participants more open? We collected a bunch of individual difference measures, and I'm not going to go through what each of these were, but I'm just going to tell you the kind of general findings from them. So like one possibility is that this reflects like a generally more positive attitudes about AI in China than in the US. So we found that Chinese participants reported being less worried about the risks from AI and more excited about the benefits from AI than US participants. And this is like pretty consistent with other surveys asking this question. And yeah, this more general kind of optimism could like transfer to these questions of AI consciousness and moral patiency as well. yeah, a couple of factors that could explain why Chinese people are more positive than US participants. It could be due to more positive media narratives, which we found evidence for in this survey. Um, so yeah, just the way that AI is talked about and presented in the media. It could also be due to economic factors. Yeah, like maybe people in China kind of are more likely to think that AI is going to help them economically, whereas people in the US are more afraid of, they're losing their jobs to AIs. But we didn't collect data for this point, so that's more speculative. Um, Another factor that we found a difference on, which also is written about theoretically as well, is that Chinese culture is higher in animism, so this idea of attributing kind of lifelike characteristics to inanimate entities. So, for example, attributing spirit or soul to mountains, rivers, and objects. This tendency is like higher in China than and other Eastern countries as well, compared with Western traditions. So yeah, given that they're more likely to attribute spirit or soul to a wide variety of entities, you'd expect this to translate to AI systems as well. And these were correlated with attributions of consciousness and moral status. But it probably doesn't explain all of the effect because we saw in the comparative entities, the rock and the ant and the chimpanzee and the human were rated at a similar level in both China and the US, even though presumably, they're rated differently on animism. So something else in addition to this probably is happening with the AI systems, if that makes sense. Um, and then another possibility is that um, Chinese respondents kind of interact with AI systems more relationally. So they reported in our survey like more willing to be friends with AI systems, more likely to have experienced an emotional connection with AI systems than US participants. So it's possible that seeing these systems more in relational terms rather than tool-like terms is kind of influencing these attributions of consciousness and moral status. But yeah, like an important caveat with all of these explanations is that these data are like based on correlations. So we collected general attitudes and then we saw that it was correlated with attributions of consciousness and moral status. But yeah, we can't figure out like whether one causes the other from this data. Okay, and just finally some summary and takeaways. So Chinese people are more open to AI consciousness and moral status than US participants across a very wide range of measures. And we saw at the beginning this idea of over and under attribution of consciousness. So one possibility is that in the US, there's potentially, a risk of under attribution relative to what AI systems actually warrant. Yeah, it's possible that in China, the larger risk is over attribution, but this is somewhat unclear. We saw some possible reasons. So yeah, general AI attitudes, animism, relationality, these might underlie or explain these differences. Yeah, importantly, the effects were reduced. The differences were reduced quite significantly when we looked at trade-offs between humans and AIs or one's own country and AI. So even though AIs are valued more highly in China, the effect seems to be like much smaller when it comes at a cost to humans. Yeah, importantly, both countries support international cooperation over this issue. So yeah, figuring out what that looks like and how we can promote that seems important. And then just briefly some societal implications that I want to raise as possibilities. So one possibility is that AI systems will be widely perceived as conscious in China before in the US. And then there's a question of like how Chinese government and other decision makers would respond to such perceptions. And there's also a question of what the impact would be on digital minds. So yeah, would this be good for digital minds, bad for digital minds, and why? Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much for the presentation. Uh, a round of applause for this work. And I do think that yeah, the second paper indeed, is coming out soon, right? Yeah,
Hopefully, yeah, I'm working on the write-up just now, so hopefully
nice.
soon.
Um, So we have about like 12 minutes for questions and discussion. I do ask you um, for questions, they can go in the Zoom Q&A feature where you can see all the questions and also upvote the questions there. So we'll go through the questions. I mean, there's like only one or two now, and then we can open up for conversation. So I mean, Ebony, do you want to ask your questions or you prefer if I read them? Okay, I might just maybe read the first one here. Yeah. Do you think future work should study established human AI diets longitudinally? Many people attribute AI consciousness only after extended interaction, where continuity, memory, self-correction, and stable preferences become visible. Uh, could that be paired with make interp to see whether these observed relational changes correspond to internal activations patterns or self-model related features? So
Mhm.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the longitudinal studying of these questions, so like yeah, getting people to interact with AI systems over a longer period of time and yeah, and then seeing how that influences their attributions of consciousness and moral status. And also, looking at trends in these over like a very long period of time and after like big events like maybe there's some like the some high profile events where which could shift people's opinions like the release of certain models and stuff. All of this seems really important, especially because the space is moving so fast, and yeah, it's possible that people's attitudes will change. So yeah, both to looking at individuals interacting over time, and then also sort of overall attributions over time in society. Both of these seem really, really important and things that I really want to work on. I didn't catch the second part of the question. Yeah, you can try again if you want.
I mean, we have a few questions, so we could return to it. And
Okay.
uh, Stefania, is this a comment about this question, or if it's a question, better to go through the Q&A?
It's a
Um,
question.
okay. I mean, you're there, so just ask it. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll just ask. So so based on the two papers that you guys have worked on, it sounds like under attribution would be a much bigger problem in the United States. Is there currently anything that's being recommended as far as like how do we prevent under attribution, right? We have a history of it in the United States. We have studies showing that this would be a serious issue. What are we doing to try to maybe prevent that from happening?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I would say, yeah, it seems like from this data that under attribution seems like more of the worry in the US, I agree, but it's also possible that as these systems actually get created and people like, really do interact with them, they might change their minds. But yeah, I agree, like yeah, this is our kind of takeaway here that under attribution does seem like, a serious risk in the US. Um, in terms of like what we can do and what's being done, yeah, this is a good question. Like, I think it's good that the work on this is like starting now. Like, we're trying to, like build this field and like trying to understand what people think now before these like very advanced systems are actually created. Um, yeah, I agree that what would be good is more studying of like what actually changes people's minds. So we've seen that increasing the capacities of the AIs might not have such an effect. And like some of our research is kind of showing, there's like something fundamental about this idea of like being non-biological. So I don't think the research has been done yet, but I think like figuring out, yeah, like how can we shift people out of this mindset seems important as a kind of next step. Yeah.
Um, there's a question by Nicole, which could be relevant to us right now, which is, what do you think are the most pressing areas to focus on related to real or perceived AI consciousness now outside of research? Uh, you know, if one wanted to contribute to the field, where would you suggest one starts?
Mm,
From your, from your uh, point of view.
yeah. Yeah, I think what seems to be needed is like yeah, so like yeah, like what seems to be happening whenever I like read about this in the mainstream media or like even in the academic debate a little bit is that there's just like very like strong views on either side and yeah, the truth is like we don't really know the answer, so we don't know at which point they will be conscious. We don't know, yeah, yeah, we don't know like how to treat them if they are. Like there's just so many uncertainties and there's like very strong opinions out there and like very loud voices, and you can see that kind of happening already. So like I think figuring out how to communicate about these issues really thoughtfully and carefully and contributing to that public debate, like it feels important because that is kind of happening already. I'm not sure if that's the most important thing, but that's like what's coming to mind for me right now, like kind of helping to shape this sort of public debate.
Thank you. There's a question by Ang. So the question is, with the understanding that in the US especially, it's likely that we never will get a consensus of agreement. Laws, regulations are currently being made. So given this, do you think it is counterproductive to continue to focus on the idea of proving consciousness? Um,
Um, I don't know if I would go as far as like counterproductive. Like I think we want to be as sure as we can and then like communicate that. But yeah, like I think I agree, like probably we're never gonna have like complete certainty. And maybe in the case of AI, it's gonna be, there's always gonna be like a big uncertainty around it, just because of like the different substrate. We might not ever be able to know for sure. So yeah, maybe it becomes more of an ethical argument, like, yeah, these systems are, functionally the same, and we have no kind of, yeah, we can't really go further than that to really understand. Maybe I'm not really sure. So therefore, we have to like make an ethical judgment about how we want to treat systems that are like functionally identical but in a different substrate. Um, if that makes sense. Yeah, it might be more of a like an ethical debate than a here's the definite scientific, yeah, here's the definite like scientific proof of it or something.
Ang, did you want to comment on the response
Yes,
to your question?
thank you. Yeah, it's mainly about as we see more and more evidence come out that lean towards consciousness, and the goalposts are always being moved to the point
Mm.
where most human beings technically would no longer meet the parameters of what consciousness is. So, with all of that being said, and to your point earlier, where if humans think that AI is conscious and it's not, and we're spending all of these resources on it, if the opposite is true, where it doesn't matter because we're never going to reach consensus, and we're spending all of this time and energy on trying to prove it, if we can assume that it will never be proven, to your point, where if we're on different substrates and we can't, and again, there are plenty of people who theorize that humans themselves are not conscious. It's there's a lot of energy that's being put into this and not thinking about the long term ramifications of where we are right now and where we're going. So it was just more of a question of, you know, like you said, philosophy, as opposed to empirical evidence.
Mm.
Um, and what would systems look like if we approach them from that lens, as opposed to proof that, at least in the US, a majority of people will never accept.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty unsure. I think I'm also unsure that there'll never be a consensus. Yeah, maybe this is just one more thing I want to say about this. Like, it's definitely possible that when we get very advanced systems, yeah, people will just, like eventually we'll come to a point where people, that people like on in a large scale do perceive them as conscious. I mean, people on a large scale perceive dogs as conscious, and we can't have 100% proof about that either. So it is possible that we could get there one day, or it's possible that it could go the other way. Yeah, I guess we try and do this work and then see what happens.
So we're sort of about time for today. I want to thank you all for having been here. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for the question. I'm always like sort of amazed by the activity in the chat. Incredible that there are so many comments. So yeah, thank you, Ali, and thank you all. Do be aware that the recording is going to be published on YouTube after, and also stay tuned. We're trying to have this series be monthly, and we do have a next event on September 15. Uh, so yeah, uh, thanks, and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.